Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I am Alex O'Neill. I'm the Head of Compliance here at Agilio Software, Dental Division, and really delighted to have everyone on the webinar and to be able to talk about this topic, attracting and retaining team members. It's something that's quite close to my heart, and I'm very fortunate and lucky to have two of my favourite colleagues joining me today. We've got Nikki and Christine down there, so they're gonna introduce themselves. So Nikki, could you just tell everybody who you are, what you do here, and just a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. I'm Nikki Berryman. Been in dentistry for about 25 years now, really showing my age there. Started out as a dental nurse, same as a lot of you on the webinar today. Ended up as a business manager and currently work at Agilio as their corporate implementation manager. And
Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine Smethurst. I don't expect any of you to be able to say my surname. I've been with Agilio for nearly 3 months now, but I've been in dentistry for over 20 odd years, and again showing my age. But I started off as a dental nurse and progressed through many roles within dentistry, so I've had quite a nice life in dentistry, I would say.
Oh, fantastic. And obviously the reason that Christine and Nikki are joining us on this webinar today is that they've got a wealth of experience in this area as well, of helping practices and seeing of helping practices and developing great practices and working with great practices. And you know, when you've been on the support side as well of dentistry, you see a lot of practices. You know, I've seen hundreds of practices, and I've seen people who do things well, and I've seen people who do things badly. And the people who do things well, quite often, a lot of them are doing the same thing. So we're going to talk about those things. And there's a few things that if you get right, you can create a great place to work. And one of the reasons I asked Nikki to be here is that Nikki used to run a practice that was subject to our quality practice scheme inspection. And I honestly think it's the best practice I've ever visited. The atmosphere was amazing. The team were happy. It was a wonderful place to go and spend the day. So I've asked Nikki to talk a little bit later on about how she's created that environment. And Christine's got a passion for lifelong learning and has worked for a principal who really invested in his team and cared about them. So we're going to be talking a bit about that, and Christy's going to talk a bit about that case study. So going to jump into the webinar in a second with the slides. Just a little bit of just the housekeeping first. Obviously, I think most of you can probably see the chat, and we've got a Q&A panel there. If you've got any questions, they go in the Q&A. We won't touch them until the end of the webinar, until it's finished. So we'll do questions at the end. If you're having any tech problems, you can type those into the chat, and someone who's supporting on that will send you a message or will reply in the chat. When we do get to the questions at the end, I'll mention it again, but please don't upvote the questions. If we're trying to, we are British here and we believe in queuing. So if you upvote a question, it starts moving the questions around, and actually what it means is we're not able to answer as many questions because we're trying to figure out where the question has gone. So so I'll move on to the webinar now and we'll talk about that. And okay, so just a little bit at the beginning for those of you, just talk about what we've been doing. We've just finished 18 months of work that started off with a very comprehensive survey that our members answered and really engaged on. And we took the results of that survey and we created focus groups that some of you here were involved in to really understand what people wanted from our system. iComply has evolved from being an operational and compliance excellence and HR system over the years, and now we've taken it through its latest evolution, which is to be very streamlined, and it is the next gen version of iComply, where because of our history and our research base, we've been able to identify priorities for compliance activities. They're all compliance, meeting legal minimums, but we've been able to give them flags for people. We've been able to allow you to choose what you want in your cycle, to give you the flexibility. And all the feedback that I've heard is that everyone's loving iComply Next Gen. If you have iComply right now and you've not logged in, this is not something you need to buy. You have this. We've upgraded you to it. That's part of the service. So just in the chat, can you tell me what you think for those of you who've logged in? Is this we've done so much work to, as I said, 18 months of everything, multiple project streams. There's been significant investment in this. We've added the categories where we've categorized things as compliance and then given them priorities. We've added tags to it. You can view your month in a list, you can filter, and you can get a lot more quickly to the sign off that activity button. So Sabrina said so much easier to use. She's loving it. So that's the sort of, but that said, we're not just about positive feedback. If there's something you don't like, if there's something you want us to change, if you want us to do more, then we're all ears. Our mission is to make the software that we would have wanted as practice managers when we were in software. So please let us know. Yeah, the comments haven't looked at it a lot more. So if you're on this webinar, someone's just said haven't looked into it that much, but it looks great. Mary said like it much better. I won't spend too much time on this. I just wanted to hear. Louise, thank you for that feedback. I will mention that to the right team. So if you've got iComply, I'm glad you're liking it. If you're on this webinar and you don't have it, I think this is probably what you've been waiting for to join us. This is what everyone needs right now. So if you are interested in this, then there's going to be a pop-up that's going to come on the screen in a second. You can have a chat with our new business team, and they can show you the new iComply Next Gen. Samantha said, for those who haven't signed up to the HR service, are we going to lose the HR resources that we had access to in the past? All we've done at the moment is we've moved the HR activities and documents to what we call operational. We're not mandating them in the system because legally you don't have to have a disciplinary policy. Business-wise, it's a very good idea to have one, but you don't have to have one. It's not necessary to pass your HR or CQC inspection. So there's no plan at the moment to move those out of iComply or do anything like that. We've just made it so if you don't want to do them, you don't have to do them. But I know a lot of people will want to do them. So we're just giving you more choice, more flexibility, and the feedback's been great. Roadmap coming up. We've got time and attendance coming into iTeam. iTeam now includes, we could do a whole webinar on that. Maybe we should. But the iTeam app now includes the mandatory documents. So when you onboard a new team member, it will tell you exactly what you need to get on file. It will enable them to log in and submit the documents for you to review. So you're not having to chase your new associate for their indemnity. It will then set an alarm to email 12 months later to tell the associate to submit their new indemnity. It's got all the holiday request features in there, so you're not having to figure out who's off when. It will automatically tell them that holiday slot is taken, and we're bringing time and attendance into there so people can clock in, clock out, and we're just figuring out the bit of how to link it to payroll. So the iTeam app is just, as I said, it's been designed by practice managers for practice managers. So again, if you have iComply and you're interested in looking at iTeam, a pop-up will come up from about that right now. If you're interested in talking to our new business team about any of our services, that'll come up for you. I think it's a great time to get on board with that. We have other stuff on the horizon that we are not talking about, which is very exciting. But the one we have mentioned is iService. So I won't go into the details of that, but there's going to be some new software coming in end of Q1 this year to help you with all the servicing aspects of everything and track that. Great for groups, good for individual practices as well. So I'm going to get into the meat of the webinar now. So what are the topics? So attracting and retaining team members in 2022. I think due to many reasons, economic forces, the pandemic, historical, cultural aspects of dentistry as a profession and as a place to work, we've hit this almost perfect storm right now of it being very hard to attract and retain team members. I was looking at a document that we put together in 2019, I think it was, that said we're currently experiencing a recruitment crisis, and that was before the pandemic. So it's just magnified this massively. Now what this webinar is talking about, how to do recruitment, how to write a good job advert, because that's the simple stuff. What we wanted to talk about was the deeper stuff that we think's more important for your business. And I use the word business because we're going to see, is your dental practice, if you're on this and you're an owner, is your dental practice a business, or is it a way for you to have your own job? And we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about, businesses, real businesses have culture, vision, mission, strategy, leadership. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about increasing efficiency and reducing stress through software. not just our software, but the other softwares that you can get and what they do and the benefits to your practice. We'll talk about why corporate social responsibility is very much important these days, especially with attracting and retaining the younger generation. We're going to talk about investing in your team, development and lifelong learning. This is Christine's going to talk about this. And then Nikki is very, very passionate, and she, I've actually mixed them up on the slides there, in that it should be creating, delivering meaningful onboarding and benefits. So she's going to talk about creating and developing benefits packages and what is a benefits package, and most importantly, what isn't. I'm not going to steal your thunder on that one, Nikki. And Nikki, Christine, if you want to go off camera right now, by the way, you can. If you'd rather, I know it's quite uncomfortable to sit there and just nod and smile while someone's doing slides for 20 minutes. Yeah, so feel free. And we're going to talk about delivering meaningful onboarding and why these things are important, and why it's, I won't steal too much, but why it's important to induction onboarding is inducting someone into your culture, into your practice. It's not just a tick box for doing the induction sheet so you can show a compliance inspector, which in I'd say not an insignificant number of practices it has become because of time shortages. So Nikki will talk about that and her thoughts about it, but we very much agree on this. So I think asking yourself a question is a really good place to start. If you're an owner or a manager, would you be happy working for you or for your business if you weren't the manager or the owner? Or another way to look at it is, why should someone come and work for you? Why should they choose to work for you? Or an even different way of looking at it is, what is it that they're coming to work for? Are they coming to work for a person? Or are they coming to work for a business that's on a mission, that wants to achieve something? Human beings like to belong. We are tribal animals that have, probably our culture has evolved faster than our brains. I think it's I can't remember what it's called, the human chimp, or there's a really good book on this. It basically says our culture has evolved far faster than our brains are. We want to belong. A lot of us want to be led. Majority of people aren't natural leaders. This is why there are alphas I won't go into the biology of it, but so going back to the question, actually, is like, would you be happy working for your business if you weren't the manager or the owner? And why should people come to work for you? And there's a really good book that talks about this, the E-Myth, which stands for the entrepreneurial myth. And there's a dental version here, and you can see on there. And if what I'm saying is new to you, or you've not heard this before, that book's a very good book to look at the basics and understand this. And what the E-Myth says, the entrepreneurial myth says, is that most dentists don't own a true business; they own a job. In the dental practices, and the quote at the bottom there is like, I often say that most dental practices don't work; the people who own them do. In other words, most dental practices are jobs for the people who own them, rather than businesses that are focused on what they want to achieve or where they want to go. And I don't know if it's most, but I'd say a significant proportion. And you can tell the difference when you walk into a practice as a consultant, whether or not it's a vehicle for the principal to not work for someone else and have their own freedom, or if it's an actual business. And what I'm getting at here is that people want to work for businesses or for things that have mission and vehicle and have purpose. They're less, and especially in 2022, they're going to be less excited about going and working for a job, as it were. So aspects of a true business, and I'm just going to talk about a few of these and contrast them with things. Like, a true business has leadership, and that's very different from management. And I think this is true to say for the whole webinar is almost every slide in this webinar could be a whole presentation in itself. And Nikki and I and Christine were talking about this before this, is that, if you find this stuff interesting and fascinating, then please let us know if you want more of it, because we do business coaching. We don't do it as much as we used to do, but we're experienced business coaches and managers, and a lot of us care about this sort of stuff. So if you want us as a company, if you'd like us to do more webinars on the aspects of this throughout this year, please let us know. So leadership. So true leadership rather than management. And I'm going to go into what leadership is and what a real leader, a good leader, looks like. And I've been very fortunate to work for one and seen why successful leadership makes the difference to a business. The reason we have been successful with iComply, with Code historically, now with Agilio, is that we came from a place of very, very strong leadership and vision and mission, and it's something we worked on. And when I came to work here, I wasn't sold a job, I was sold a journey. Actually, I was sold something, if that makes sense. Real businesses are authentic. And what I mean by this is quite interesting. I'm not sure if people have seen the news today, where Brewdog, the owner of Brewdog, a company that has, I'm sure everyone knows it, it's an independent IPA beer brewing company that's been massively successful with their Punk IPA, and they've had people investing in them. And the news today is that it's been alleged that the owner, who has been marketing this way for years, gaining followers, everything, has £500,000 of shares in Heineken. So immediately his authenticity has gone. So this is when it gets into culture and missions and values. If you're not authentic, then eventually it will trip you up. So I've told this story on, I don't know if I've told it on webinars before, but I've told it when we've been presenting, is that I once had a client who wanted, this is before I was with Agilio years ago, probably 10 years ago now. I had a client who said to me, like, I need you to come in, and my team keep on leaving. I'm paying them a lot of money and they just keep going. And the main reason it turned out to be is that the value of his practice was his values, his culture that he put on the wall and he trained his team on, and he mentioned in inductions, was treat people how you want to be treated. And then as a principal, he came in late every day. He then worked through his lunch every day, and then he left bang on time and left the nurses to do all the decon after finishing late. And his nurses would last 6 months and then walk out the door because he wasn't authentic. I won't say what they said, but I'm sure you can imagine what it was. So having a culture, it needs to be authentic. Your values need to be authentic. Real businesses are into development. They're interested in developing their team members. Multiple ways to reach strategy, but also because they care. They actually care. They want to know what you want to achieve as a person, and your manager or your leader wants to understand who you are, wants to support you to achieve where you want to go. They're flexible. They don't just stick to the holiday policy. If someone wants Friday off and it's Wednesday and it's Thursday and they haven't given 2 times the notice or whatever it says in the contract, they just say no to the holiday or something like that. And we hear about these things on our iTeam support line. And just saying yes to that person can be the difference between them staying or going. I was reading an article online, I think it was in Forbes or Harvard Business Review or something, where someone had said the only reason they left their company was because they'd worked there for loads of years. They'd worked there for a decade. They had really given everything, where they'd been asked to stay late or something, and then their wife was in a car crash, and he got a call from the hospital saying, and I'm sure people wouldn't be like this, call from the hospital saying your wife's in hospital. He asked his boss, can I go to the hospital? And the boss said, can you just give me 10 more minutes? Obviously, I don't think that would happen mostly in a dental practice, but it shows literally that person for 10 years dedicated that one moment he wanted to leave. So being flexible, caring, understanding your team, getting to know them, having respect for them, appreciating them, giving them autonomy, not micromanaging them, and if you can, giving them a benefits package that's way beyond or at least beyond the statutory minimums that you need to give someone. So I think this is taken from the same book, Gerber's E-Myth Dentist, and I just want to read this one out. And a successful principal is a leader, not simply someone who teaches patients how to care for themselves and protect their oral hygiene, but a sage, a rich person in the broadest sense of the word, a strong father, mother, wife or husband, a friend, teacher, mentor, and spiritually grounded human being, and a person who can see clearly into all aspects of what it means to lead a fulfilling life. And for those who don't know, the picture on there is Paul Mendelsohn, who owned us who sold Code to help Agilio be formed. And Paul was very much that person. When I read this quote, I was like, wow, that's Paul, because this is who Paul was to his management team and a lot to the wider company. We were only successful, and I can honestly say this, and I think this is really important. We were only successful with iComply and with everything because Paul cared as much about us as he did about the business. When I joined the company, he said, Alex, do what do you want to do? And I said, oh, I'd love to do an MBA one day. And he's like, okay, when we hit this much money, or when we get, I can't remember the exact wording, when you hit 10 years with the company, I'll pay for you to do your MBA. He's like, I'll help you achieve that. He turned around to me and he said, what course would you, Cranfield University Business School. Obviously, you can do this on a different scale for different types of businesses. But he said, Alex, here's the menu of all their courses on leadership and management. Which one do you want to do? So he got to know me and what I wanted to achieve. I honestly wouldn't have bought my property that I have right now, my flat, if he hadn't told me that I needed to I won't quote him exactly, but get moving and get it done. And he did this with the entire management team. It wasn't just about us working for him and I comply. It was about how much he cared. But then on the other side, he also had fantastic vision, and he communicated that, and he sold us what he wanted to achieve. He knew what he wanted to achieve. He knew what he wanted. He had a strategy, and we worked on that every year. And I just think that's really important to understand. And I'd say very few practices that we visit have this. Some of them have part of it, a lot have none. And that's what attracts people, and that's what retains them, being part of something, being on a mission, part of vision. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So if we talk about leadership, management is making sure that systems are in place and they work and they deliver the vision. Leadership is more about influencing people and getting them to maximize the efforts of them towards an achievement of a goal. That's one definition, but you can only really socially influence people if you care about them. If they think you don't care, you're not going to have any influence over them. People need to want to work for you. People need to want to achieve for the business. They need to want to achieve the goals. And that's what leaders do. Leaders inspire and empower people, and they create shared vision. And what I mean by they create shared vision is they work with their team in order to figure out what it is they want to achieve, what is the vision of the business, and they make that very, very clear, and they talk about it. And Nikki will talk about this. They induct people into it when they're interviewing people. They're telling people what it is the business is going to achieve, how they're going to help them achieve that, bringing them on board, why they want their skills in order to achieve the vision, asking them how they can support them to do more on that. They lead from the front. I think that's a really obvious one. Don't ask people to do anything that you wouldn't be prepared to do yourself, or at least understand what it is. I mean, I was talking to another manager about this, and I think we'd both been in a similar situation where we'd been asked to take over specialist practices, and we didn't understand the specialisms. I mean, I'm going back 12, 13 years. I used to spend my lunch times in the surgery with the head nurse, just asking her to explain to me how implant placement works, show this. I needed to understand every single thing they were doing in those surgeries, because otherwise, how could I help manage the business? And they're consistent with the values, which is what I was talking about before, about authenticity, being authentic versus not being authentic. But in order to be consistent with values, you have to have them. And this is where we get into culture. This could be a whole series of webinars on what organizational culture is. Essentially, like culture at its core stems from the leader of a business or someone who sets it up. And if culture is not defined and written down, and I'll get to how you do that, or I'll touch upon that. But if culture isn't defined and written down, then the culture that will appear will just be the raw personality of the leader, the person in charge. And it's based around at the bottom, you can see at the bottom on that slide, your assumptions and beliefs. And actually quite often unconscious beliefs, as it says there, you don't know your beliefs. Actually, if you're asked to write down your belief structure, you can't do it. And actually your team might understand it better because they've seen your decisions. And the way I describe this to people is that your values and your unconscious beliefs, when a decision comes, say, to either, stick to the rules, as we were talking about earlier, and not give someone that holiday off, or be flexible, understanding, and caring. If you're not an understanding, caring person, naturally, you might just stick to the rules and make the decision. If you're a caring, empathetic person, then you might make the decision the other way, but you won't even think about that. You'll just naturally go one way. So if you've set up a business yourself as a principal, and you've not defined this stuff and written down of what you want it to be, then naturally it will just evolve based on your personality and the way you make decisions. And you might not realize the influence that you're having further down the chain, what your decisions are showing the team about the values of the business. And I think a really good example of this is, and I've seen this in multiple practices, is where say the practice manager gets frustrated with the principal because the principal keeps making decisions or something like that, and the practice manager is thinking, well, why am I here? Why am I here? You know, I've been recruited for my business acumen. The principal told me in the interview that that they hadn't been to business school and they didn't necessarily understand that, so they needed my help. And then they're almost micromanaging me or making these decisions that I don't necessarily agree with. And so what I've done is I've put in a management meeting, you know, organize this. So we'll have a management meeting every single week. And then the principal starts booking patients into the management meeting slot. What message does that give to the team member about how important that time is, how important that relationship is, or their job is, if you're prioritizing the patient over them or over their concerns or something like that? And that happens quite often when practice meetings get put in or stuff like that. As soon as an emergency comes up or it's a problem, we put the patient in that slot. And this brings me on to something which is like equity theory, which is going to sound really, really obvious, but people get really annoyed if you don't treat them equally or if you treat them like second-class citizens. So another one of my bugbears, and I apologize if anybody has this in this practice, is the Nespresso for the patient and Nescafe for the team. I think you've got to treat the team equally, and what you'll find is if you know, the extra £1,000 it would cost you on Nespresso pods in the year will infinitely outstrip the value you get from that, will infinitely outstrip the money you spent, versus the inequity you develop and the feeling that you give the team on where they are in this hierarchy if you do it the other way around. So five steps towards actually, if you want to take control of this. And again, this is a whole, you know, this is a whole process that if you were doing it with a consultant, you would do this in meetings after meetings after meetings. But you collaboratively create your mission with your team, and maybe start with the principal or principals, and you add value statements in there. Now I've put on there about embracing compliance as quality. So I apologize, I took this from another deck, but it's about, what are your value statements? What do you stand for? What is the mission? What is the practice trying to achieve? You make sure they're communicated and understood, and then you live those values. And because as soon as you don't, you become inauthentic. And going back to the beginning of this is about having a business rather than having a job. And successful businesses have mission and value that is lived, is communicated, is lived, is communicated, is understood, and people hold each other accountable to it. As I said, and as soon as that, we talked about Brewdog before, and the practice is led and managed in accordance with those values. Now, this is where, you know, personality won't play a part, because the great thing about culture and the great thing about something else is it works backwards. There's a backwards mechanism with it. So if you define the values and you define how you think you want people to act, including yourself as the principal or yourself as the manager, and people start doing those, then it actually then creates the unconscious beliefs. So it works backwards, and that's what the literature says on it. I did my just to give some context here, I did my master's degree on management. My dissertation was in organizational culture and culture change. So this is my area of interest, as it were, academic interest. So it does work, and you can do that. So then once you've got that, so we're talking about moving from being owning a job to owning a business, which people are attracted to. You know, you can then look at the vision. You can look at, well, you can do this either way around. I'd probably start with vision and mission and then go on to values. So you look at the vision. You know, the vision is what you want the practice to be. The mission is how you're going to get there, and then your strategy is a bit more short term than that. Vision and mission is more long term. Your strategy is more to do with how you're going to get there. And sorry, your strategy is more like what you want to achieve within a time frame, and then your tactics are how you're going to get there. As I said, this is very dense. I would like the time to unpack all of that. Obviously, any members who are interested in talking to me about this, obviously it's head of compliance. I am in and out of meetings all the time, but if anyone wants to chat about this, we can probably schedule something in at some point, just a brief chat, and I can give some guidance on this. I'm really happy to help any of our members with this. And they should be reviewed regularly. So vision. Let me give some examples of this. I think I might have it on the. No, I don't have it on the next slide. But vision, mission, and values. Vision is we want this practice to be the #1 practice in this area, where we care about our team and we support them, and we want to be the #1 implant center in wherever. Mission will be we do this by investing in our team, doing this and that, and our values are we treat each other how we always want to be treated. So we've decided where we want to be, who we are. We can recruit with this. That's attractive. That's attractive. That's not saying come and work for our practice. We've got a digital workflow and 28 days holiday or something. This is very much like you're buying into something, and then you can work backwards from that, because if you've got your vision, your mission, your strategy, that equals opportunities for the team and training and investment that can help you show them, if you can get their interest to align with your interest, that's great. And then you can figure out the PDPs and the training around this to get where you want to go. So this has multiple, what I'm getting at with this is it has multiple benefits in that it creates something attractive where people want to become part of it. People want to stay in it, especially if it's achieving and they're learning and they're developing, and you've created this business rather than having a job, as it were. Yeah, so it helps to retain and keep people. Moving on to another point of increasing efficiency and reducing stress through software. If the job of the leader is to create the vision, the mission, the strategy, to create the business and the environment and to create the environment that people want to achieve, then the manager's job, or part of the manager's job, is to, I don't like the word invent on this quote, but it's to manage the systems and improve the systems and have efficient systems to help realize this vision. So software are efficient systems, and especially our software. Obviously, I'm completely biased on this point, but I've been here working with this team and this team growing for coming up to 9 years now. Or is it 8 years? 8 or 9 years now. And that's what we do. We are literally looking at how can we solve the problems through software to give people more time to actually grow the business? How can we what are people doing in 8 steps that the software can do in 1 step, or can automate all those steps? And then that's why you see, you've got digital workflow in place now in practices. It reduces lab costs, reduces time to completion of treatment, increases treatment plan conversion. This is why digital workflow makes sense. Accounting software, and for those of you who've been, I'm sure some people will say this in the chat, I remember when Xero came into dental practice, and it just revolutionized how we did our monthly profit and loss, and we looked at our accounts, because it just made it so easy to do it. And obviously these softwares are around now, but before, 10, 12 years ago, we were using Sage, and it was horrific, the old Sage. Obviously just my personal opinion, but it was very, very old school accounting books rather than disruptive technology. Practice management software has helped us get rid of the appointment book and have things like Exact, and we've got Dentally, and has enabled us to report and shortcut a lot of stuff that before we'd have to ask our accountant to get us, because we can run the report out of the system as well. Similarly, iComply is, I think, one of the reasons we've been very successful is that we're always ahead of the game, and we're looking at what the CQC are doing, what HIW are doing. We're looking at inspection reports. We're talking to our members, and the software works, tried and tested, and you have it, you follow it, and you should have no issue with your inspection. And it stops you having to go out there and research the policy or figure out what's changed, because that's what the job that you're outsourcing. Similarly, you've got marketing software, Hootsuite, Dengro, Infusionsoft help you to get that return from investment on that. And then other things, in iLearn, we've got the PDP reporting. So with the enhanced CPD the new enhanced CPD that came in, I think it was 2018 when the GDC put it in, there was this massive extra duty that went onto the practice in order to make sure you've now got to make sure that your associates and anyone who works in your practice who is a registered professional with the GDC, you need to make sure that they're on top of their PDP. And as I mentioned, I think it was in the last webinar, there's a lot coming out on CQC inspection reports that practices don't have sight of this. They don't know. So we developed the PDP reporting tool in iLearn to give you that. The HR software, iTeam has personnel file documents. We'll send off and request that stuff. So as I said earlier about the indemnity, it's got rota, it's got holiday requests. And I know from my personal experience, holiday requests can be really difficult to manage, but if it's in the system, it's really easy. So I think part of having and one of the reasons I mentioned this on a slide is also that it's really interesting, as a sector, the healthcare sector and dentistry specifically, we're really behind the curve on this. If I go just around the corner from the office over there's 2 coffee shops opposite each other, and I know the owners of them, and they've got a couple of coffee shops, and they absolutely have HR software in their coffee shops. They have time and attendance because they don't want to figure it out. But as a profession, we're quite behind the curve on tech, on the use of software, whereas in most companies and organizations, this stuff is standard now. So I'd really encourage you to invest in it doesn't necessarily need to be one of ours on this list, but figure out the problems that your managers are having and find the software that will save them time or money that they can focus on improving the business, and that will reduce stress as well. Corporate social responsibility. I'm just going to touch on this briefly just because I think it's very, very important. Corporate social responsibility, I think everybody knows what it is, so I won't go into loads of details on it, but it's about, again, if you've got your mission and your values are that you care, what do you care about, and how can you bring that authentically into your business, into a wider realm of CSR. If you have iComply, then we worked with Mark Topley, who's the CSR coach. We have no financial relationships, so I'm not saying this in any way for that, because Mark's a fantastic person. His website's at the bottom, dentalcsr.co.uk, where he's accrediting practices, and the bottom bullet there, or sorry, the penultimate bullet is the most important thing. Employees are typically 65% more engaged in socially responsible organizations, or organizations that manage their CSR. And then the consumer stuff, the 90% of people will be more loyal with price increases, 88% will trust them more. And basically there's 4 pillars to CSR, which is people and ethics, environment and sustainability, charity and community, and communication, advocacy, and management. And again, I think I might ask Mark to come and do Nikki's got her camera on. Nikki, you know Mark, don't you? Yeah, you're on mute.
Yes,
yeah, I think we should ask him to come and do a webinar potentially.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really good to talk about this. But if you have iComply, there is this document in there that you can search for, and there's a template policy, and these are optional in iComply because you don't need them to pass your CQC or your HIW inspection. But we feel that it would be great for you to have them to create a business where people will want to work and want to stay. So investing in your team, development, lifelong learning. I think I won't talk too much about this, but I've mentioned about training to meet strategy. If you've got a business with values, mission, you know where you're going, then the training then comes next. It just flows, and if you can tie that in with what people want to do, and you can talk to them, you're caring and you're understanding what your team want to achieve, then that's only going to be beneficial. So that's pretty much me, my whistle-stop tour of about 10 topics that could be hour-long webinars. So I'm going to hand over to Nikki. And as I said before, the reason I asked Nikki to have a chat in this webinar and talk to people is that, honestly, having seen hundreds of practices, the practice that I think Nikki would agree that she was most involved in probably in her career, and she really got her hands, really got stuck in with it. She created something where I could feel how great that environment wanted. I wanted to work there when I walked in. Can I say why I wanted to work there with the one thing, Nikki? Is that allowed, or am I going to ruin?
Yeah, no, you can say it, that's fine.
The team was it every fortnight someone came in to do massages, and I get really tense shoulders. So for me, I just thought that was fantastic. So I'm going to hand over to Nikki, who's going to talk about why having a great onboarding and a great induction into your culture, and assuming you've got to have the culture first, right, is bringing them into your culture is great for attraction and retention. So Nikki, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks so much for that. So we're going to have a look now at how we might onboard practice. We're all aware, as you heard from Alex, that there's a massive recruitment crisis going on in dentistry right now. So now really is an important time for you to review your current onboarding process to make sure that you and attract and retain your new team members for the long term. You want to think of your onboarding process really as a journey and document that journey. Turn it into a tangible document that you can share with your existing team members and certainly your new team members that join your practice. We're going to have a look at all the actions that you need to consider as well when onboarding a new team member into your business. So first of all, we're going to talk about all the pre-start admin. Now, everything on the list that you can see on the slide there in front of you are all things that you really should be completing before that new member joins your team. It's really crucial to ensure, wherever possible, that all the admin is completed prior to day one. It's really important to understand that the onboarding process absolutely is not a box ticking exercise. There's nothing worse for a new team member turning up at your practice on day one just to spend a day being sat in an office somewhere reading policies and signing documents. That's absolutely not what it's about at all. And that actually will be a really very negative experience for that new team member joining your practice. And you'll miss a key opportunity then to really integrate them into your team really very well. So make sure that you do all of your pre-start admin before that person joins your practice on the first day. Make sure that you remember to confirm all the small details like the uniform, the dress code. Make sure that they understand the lunch arrangements and maybe where they should park and public transport if they don't live in your local area. And be really clear and outline in a lot of detail what will happen on their first day and certainly their first few weeks. In essence, make sure that they are really as prepared as possible so that when they arrive at your practice on their first day, then they already feel like part of the team to some degree. The second thing we're going to look at is what should be happening in your practice on day one and week one. And that's really about connecting the person with your team, really, and the people that work in your practice. That's the most important thing to consider. There needs to be a real focus on making that person feel really welcome and relaxed in your practice. Make sure that everybody in your practice knows that there's a new person arriving on that day, and literally have somebody waiting by the front door to welcome them into the practice so that they know where to go and put their coat there and know where the locker is and the bathroom is, all of those kind of things. And make sure that you take the time to really introduce the new person to your whole team. I've always thought a really good idea is to create a buddy colleague for that new person in your practice as well, so they've got a first point of contact, somebody that they can turn to if they've got any worries or concerns in their first week. And the other thing to consider is to make sure that their workstation is ready to go as well. So if you're onboarding a new receptionist, make sure that they've got access to all the tools that they need to do their job. So make sure the printer is working, make sure they've got access to all the right software and that the workstation is clean and tidy and ready to go. There's a real to your culture, your mission, your values of the practice, and to really start embedding that to your new team member really from day one, okay? Make sure the person understands where they fit into your practice and explain your practice family tree. I think a lot of people forget to do that. When you're joining a new business, you kind of don't think that's really important because you know everybody that works in your practice, you know your team members really well. But actually, if you've got a really large practice, people can get lost in people really quite quickly. So it's important that people know who other people are in the practice and who to go to if they've got a problem. I think one thing that I did want to talk about really briefly, but I think it's really important, is that there's always a temptation, especially right now, for practices to expect new team members to jump into their actual role on the first day and certainly in the first week. And I really understand that, especially if you're short-staffed. Sometimes you have no other option but to make that happen. But really do try to avoid that wherever possible. I do think generally the first day in the week should be all about making that person feel settled, and allow them to just morph into their role really gradually. Spend some time with them. Month 1 through to month 3 is all about communication, connection and culture for me, really. Don't drop the communication baton. Make sure that you are having regular check-ins with that person. Don't assume that they're happy and everything's going well. Make sure that you're talking to them daily, and definitely sitting down sort of every week for an informal cup of tea, bit of cake, something like that, really informal, just to make sure that you genuinely do know how they're getting on and how they're settling into your practice. Again, there's a real opportunity here to really drive the people culture. Make sure the new people are aware of your expectations of behaviour. Introduce your team values, introduce your team goals. Make sure that people know about your social events and even things like how you celebrate birthdays in your practice, just so that the new person really appreciates what a great team that they've joined. I think one thing that's really crucial for me is giving regular feedback. People want to know how they're doing. They want to know that they're on the right track and doing well. And the other thing to consider is equally, if a new team member has interpreted some direction wrongly, then you need to feed that back really quickly. Nip any negative behaviours in the bud really quickly. Don't let behaviours slide. And instead give that new team member every opportunity that you can to perform well as soon as they can in your practice. The other thing to think about is, finally, when you've worked through all of those steps, and as Alex said, you know, we could spend probably a whole webinar just talking about these few steps. And when you get to the stage of offering somebody their final permanent contract, make sure that you do that quickly and that it's in writing, and celebrate their success. Make a real fuss of that person. Make sure that you get that person on your website with their biography. Make sure that you announce it on your social media, so the person feels really valued and they really feel special and part of your team. I suppose for me, the key thing about ensuring that you've got a really strong onboarding process is that somebody doesn't just feel that you've brought them into their practice and chucked them into their role and they're expected to kind of sink or swim. You know, that's a really negative experience for a new person joining your team. And by having a really structured onboarding process and breaking those steps down into days, weeks and months, you can make sure that that person is given every opportunity to succeed and do well in your practice, and that they'll stay with you then for the long term, which is absolutely what you want, and certainly right now. We're going to have a look at team benefits and why they are so important. And a great team benefits package, I think, in my opinion, is a key part of staff retention. It absolutely is. It helps to attract new team members. It helps your practice stand out from everybody else. But also, more importantly, it helps to retain your existing team members. I think a great benefits package will help people feel valued and supported and really engaged with the culture of your practice. And I just wanted to tell you how I structured that at the last very lovely practice that I was lucky enough to work at. I was lucky that I worked for really great, forward-thinking and progressive owners who really genuinely believed that their team was at the heart of everything that they did. And they wanted to make sure that their team felt happy and that they felt valued. And at the same time, we were just about to undergo a period of massive change in the practice. And we knew that we had to take our team on that journey with us and make sure, again, that they were really engaged. And as part of that process, we kind of thought, okay, we're missing a trick here. We need to think about other ways that we can create value and reward our team members. And then so we started to work on a benefits package. And before I go any further on that, I just want to reiterate a point that Alex brought up earlier, and that is about being very clear on what a benefit is not. And that is, I see a lot of recruitment ads around at the moment, and not in dentistry, it's everywhere, mentioning benefits such as 20 days holiday, or we'll give you your uniform, or if you work from home, we'll provide your laptop. These are not benefits, okay? These are basic legal requirements or basic tools that people need to do their job well. a real benefit is just that. It's a real benefit for that person, and it really adds value to that person in your practice. Okay, so we're just going to have a look now at how we create a benefits package. Again, I could talk about this all day. So the first thing I think that you would need to consider is planning a realistic budget for making this happen, okay? You plan and create a robust budget for your benefits package, build that into your cash flow in the same way that you would any other normal operational expense. Your budget is your priority, because you cannot build a benefits package unless you can support that financially, okay? So the first things first is create your budget. Secondly, and this is really important, and I need to hold my hand up here because I missed out on a bit of a trick with this, really. You really need to understand what your team want. Don't make assumptions about what team members will value. Ask them what they think a good benefits package will look like to them, okay? Everybody will have different ideas and everybody will want different things. And therein lies the challenge, right, and making sure that your benefits package works for everybody in the team. So take the time, spend some time with your team members to really understand what will work for them. If it takes 6 or 8 weeks to build your benefits package, that's fine. It takes the time that it takes, but just take the time to plan it carefully. You could create a menu of benefit options, and this will allow different people to choose different benefits, again, depending on what they value and their personal needs and experiences, and I did exactly that, and I'll show you something very similar in just a moment. But I think one thing for me that stands out right at this moment in time, and taking into account the present climate, is that it would be a really great idea to build in health and well-being benefits into your package. I think if that's a real focus, not only will your team be healthier and happier, but they will perform better for you at work in the long term. So maybe keep that at the forefront of your mind. So this is an idea or an example of a benefits menu. So this is an example probably of quite a gold standard menu. It mirrors something, it's very similar, very close to the one that we offered at our last practice. One thing I do just want to point out to you is when you're looking at the financial benefits, make sure that you check in with your accountant and your HR specialist before you publish any of those kind of benefits, just to make sure that you're covering yourself from a legal perspective and a tax perspective as well. And you also need to be very clear about how you're going to offer those kind of benefits to part-time team members as well. So make sure you just tick those boxes before you publish a menu. You'll see here that this menu is pretty gold standard, I have to say, but you don't have to have a big budget at all. Your menu doesn't have to be flashy. You just need to be bold, and you need to be creative and thoughtful. And you'll see on the top left-hand side that there's a box there of low-cost ideas. And you can implement those fairly cost effectively, but they actually will make a massive difference to all of your team members, okay? So those are the kind of menus that you can create depending on what kind of practice you are, depending on how many team members you've got, and certainly depending on your budget. And you could either create a standalone menu that applies to all of your team members, or you could create some options in the same way that I've done here to allow different people to choose different options depending on what's important to them. I think for me, the key thing to focus on is actually the will and wanting to make that happen as a practice owner and the practice manager. And I think if you take some genuine time and thought and care and actually commit to providing a budget for your benefits menu and publishing that to your team members, then I think that will pay dividends for you going forward. I really do think that it'll help you and they're going to be much more inclined to stay with you for the long term. Over to you, Christine.
Thanks, Nikki. I do appreciate as well that we are running out of time, so I'll try and be as quick as possible. Chris. Oh, you got my slide there.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I was just going to take at that point. We're just putting a poll up on the screen because we're just very interested with members on here on how you're managing rota in your practice. So if you just like to type a sentence on what you do, that would be fantastic. Obviously, completely optional, up to you. It'd just be very interesting to know from our current members. Sorry, Nikki. Sorry, Christine. Just before we just before we jump over, but I think just a couple of points to pick up on really quickly. I do appreciate we're running late. Is that, you know, Nikki was using the term budget, and I think it's really important to keep in mind, like going back to the job business thing, is do you have budgets? Do you know how many practices have budgets and put those aside and know what they're budgeting for and plan ahead? So I think it's very, you know, again, this all ties in with the same way in that if you're thinking yourself as a business, then budgeting is a natural part of that. It's kind of what I was getting at. And just on an induction point of view, you know, when Nikki's saying, you know, we absolutely appreciate that time is short and you quite often need someone to hit the ground running. But that week, if you can keep them out of that role for a week and spend it on inducting them, explaining the vision, explaining the values to you. Honestly, the best induction I ever had was when I was a trainee manager at Selfridges. And seriously, if you cut my arm, I still bleed Selfridges because I think it's I think it is the best store in the world.
Expensive blood.
And honestly, that's the induction. We were sold the values, the history of who Mr. Selfridge was. This was way before the TV series was out there. But you know, that induction stuck with me and still stuck with me 20 years later. So I think that's really important. So now going back to Christine. Christine, I believe, worked for someone very similar to who I worked for with Paul, that really cared about their team and invested and was very much into lifelong learning for the team and supporting them with that. So Christine, if you'd like to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, cool. So I'll go as quickly as I can. So I think in dentistry sometimes we see lifelong learning as a bit of a tick box exercise for the GDC, but really it would be nice if we viewed it more as a journey to improve our goals and aspirations. And I think by doing so, I think you can create a more sustainable dental practice and, you know, the crazy evolving world of dentistry that's changed so much in the last 10 years, hasn't it? And I think by having a culture where professional development is a key focus for your team members, I think those highly skilled individuals can help sort of contribute to that patient journey overall. And I think it helps the practice to be more successful long term. And I think staff should be given the tools and resources they need to develop. And my employer that I used to have was very good at that. And I'll get to that in a minute. But, you know, they should have access to ECPD and time off for courses, and not just standard CPD, but other things. And I'll get to that in a minute. You know, the GDC does state that practice owners should support their team members with development. And we are seeing quite a large influx at the moment with businesses that are wanting more group island subscriptions. So they're looking to put them all together and pay for all their team members, which is a really nice thing to see at the moment. So I'll just go into the next slide. So this is Simon Agabeg. I don't know if he's in the room or anybody from New Smile Dental Care can give us a wave if so. But I worked for Simon from around 2004 to 2012. He's got 2 practices in Leeds. He was an NHS practice and a private practice, predominantly NHS, and he did a lot of smile makeovers at that time. But what Simon did really well, I think, was that he was very good at making sure his team worked to the full skill mix, so the full scope of practice for dental nurses, and he paid for the courses to do that. So he paid well. You know, he gave standard holidays, but, you know, back then that was great. You know, he still gave bank holidays on top of 20 days. But what he did was he invested in the team, and you felt cared for and you wanted to do well for him, because he was very good at funding everything. You know, he used to pay for your indemnity and all those things. So you didn't really have to fund very much yourself to work as a dental nurse back then. You know, I did impression taking, we could all take x-rays. He's got a nurse now that I know is paying to do Botox, TCO training, and everybody worked that full skill mix. It made us feel valued, cared for. But what I thought he did that was really, really lovely, that is he celebrated success. So back then there wasn't much social media in 2004 as there is now. But he'd take a picture of you, he'd put it in the waiting room, he'd give you a bottle of champagne and those kind of things. And he was generally happy that you passed a course that he'd paid for, and he was really, really, really celebrated that success. But I think because he did really well at celebrating success, it enabled other team members to be inspired by everybody else, and they all wanted to jump on that journey and do well themselves. So it was very infectious, I think, as a team. And I've got a lot to thank Simon for, because he was instrumental, I think, in making me believe that I could do a lot more with my education. And I went on from that to do a degree, and then I went to work at Leeds Uni and went on to do a master's teaching qualification. I do think his early nurturing, I would say, my dental days were very important. So thank you, Simon. So I'm just going to sort of cover now 5 reasons really why you should help your team adopt a lifelong learning mindset. Now, obviously, I've just gone over some sort of key pointers from Simon's company, but human beings, we're instinctively curious creatures. We're built for development. We want to know more. A bit like what Alex pointed out. We need that fix. It makes us feel valued and appreciated. And with that comes confidence and competence, which you need in your team. You want your team to be highly confident and you want to be highly competent. Obviously, that helps with patient care, which is very important, but it also helps you to develop a really sustainable dental practice. And I think when you have a team that adopt a lifelong learning mindset above the GDC standard requirements, I think, like I've pointed out before, that growth's really evident within that practice. And let me just mention Martina White, Martina Hodgson's practice, sorry. She's got a couple of practices in Leeds. She's all about her team members. And that's just, even if you've never met her, you can feel that through like social media and how she sort of showcases her team members. So I'm just going to sort of cover now just a little bit about scope of practice. So, dental teams do need to work to their full scope of practice. In the last 15 years, the scope of practice has come a long way, but I'd still believe that not as many team members in practice as are working to their full scope of practice. And there's so much more they can do. I think that we need to enable DCPs to work to full scope of practice because obviously we know it improves efficiency of care, but also I think it stops them getting bored and wanting to leave. You hear a lot in practice about dental nurses going, oh yeah, I want to be a dental therapist. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a dental therapist. It's a very, very important trade within dentistry. But, if team members like dental nurses, for example, were given more like scope to their roles and they were able to do more at their full scope of practice and beyond, then maybe they might not leave because they'll have more fulfillment in the roles that they are doing at that time. Let's get the slides right. Yeah, so above and beyond scope of practice. So for example, there's so many different roles now within dentistry. I think that you can add in to the skill mix. So it's not just about the GDC skill mix, it's about other things that you can use and develop those team members in practice so they can go on to do courses and areas like I've said on this slide. And I feel DCPs must be allowed to independently practice other skills. There's lots of, mobilizing other resources. Obviously, we've said before, it provides high, safe quality of care, but also it makes that role and for that individual in that practice just a bit more exciting and just gives them a more clout and enables them to stay, and you can retain that staff member more. I think empowered teams working together will play a fundamental role in the transformation of your practice, and you've got to stand out now in dentistry. It's changing, and the ones that are really going for it, you can really see that and feel that, can't you? And I think the best employees are the ones who are appreciated, and I think great employees enable companies to grow. So just, everything we've sort of said today, I think there's lots of takeouts from that and take homes. So yeah, thank you. Well done, Alex.
I'm on mute. Christine, thanks for that. And I think the one thing I've just noticed, which I hope the audience have noticed too, is there's a real trend here in that Nikki worked for two very forward-thinking principles. And I think the interesting thing as well is forward-thinking for dentistry, I'd say, in a way, because a lot of these disciplines that we're talking about are things I learned in business school in 2004, 2005. As a profession, we're slow on catching up on this stuff. And I think there are a proportion of practices that's changing, but probably 50%, 40% of practices don't do any of this. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
And some of you maybe this might be brand new to you. Some of you are doing all of this, and we're not saying, you might be watching this and saying and thinking we can't do all of that. The principal's not going to sign off that, or I don't want to do that if I am the principal, or I'd like to do that, but being the type of practice we are, we can't afford that or something. So I think we're giving you a range of things here, and you can choose how you want to do it. But if you actually look, the trend that I'm seeing here is, I've talked about Paul, who brought me into code. Nikki's talked about her principals. Christine's talked about those guys. We've all worked for someone who's been like that, and it made the difference, and we remember it. And if you actually notice the other trend, Nikki said in the induction, you've got to induct them in the missions and the values. Christine said, if the value of the practice is lifelong learning, this all stems back from that whole thing of the foundations of your business and what it is. So you can't induct someone into a culture if you haven't created one. You can't you know, if you haven't talked about your values and talked about and lifelong learning being your value, you know, that we invest in our team, and I was talking about mission, then you're not going to do it. So this is almost a grounds up. As I said, this isn't about writing a good job advert, and it's creating something that when you're in, you know, when you're in a job interview, or if you talk, well, you know, we've talked about attraction with the benefits, but if you're recruiting, you know, it's a different conversation. It's, do you want to come and join us on our journey? Would you like to help us achieve our mission? Would you like to become part of something, rather than, do you want a job on reception? So here's some potential actions. You know, you don't have to do any of these, and then we'll move on to some Q&A. And I'm sorry for running over. I didn't want to be honest, I think this is such an important topic and so important right now. And, you know, you can, if you want to, you know, if you're a practice owner, review whether you own a business or you own your own job. I think that might be a good place to start. You know, if you do own a business or you want to own a business, then look at your mission, your visions, your values first. Do that exercise first, then move on to your strategy. You know, if you want some leadership training, look into it. Look into management courses. As I said, we're happy to. If you ring us up and you're like, Alex, can you recommend a leadership course or this or that? But by the way, the Dale Carnegie Institute is fantastic. I've been on a number of their courses. Cranfield Business School is fantastic. You know, review your onboarding process. You could do that. Work with your team to create an onboarding journey. Consider introducing benefits packages, explore budget and content of what those be. You know, you might think, oh, that's really expensive. Ask your team what they want to achieve and see how you can invest in them. And the word investment, and I think that's a really good thing. As a profession, we sometimes think of cost and we don't think of investment. And it's often said, but this is investment in the future. This is planting the seed so it'll grow into a beautiful flower. You know, and consider investing into software to increase efficiency and reduce stress. And you know, if you are a member or if you're not a member, I'm going to put another pop-up up for a second, so you can, if you do want to have a chat with us, no pressure. It's completely up to you, and we can talk to you about what we're doing, what our mission is, what our vision is, what we want, what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, and I'm pretty much done. So it's been fantastic. We'll move on to the Q&A. I hope that's been really, really helpful. Just in the chat, could you let us know how did you find that? Was that helpful? Was it interesting? Was it new? Is it something you've heard everything before? Did it give you at least one thing that you want to take away and think about and discuss? Really interested in the feedback of what you thought of that, because it was something new that we're kind of new, a different type of webinar for us, I think. So we'll move on to the Q&A now. Just whilst I'm waiting for the delay that inevitably happens with the broadcasting for the answers to come up. Food for thought from Alison. Very interesting from Louise. Really helpful. Sabrina wants to have a look into iTeam.
My inbox is pinging quite a bit.
Samantha wants us to break down the topics.
Fab idea.
Samantha wants us to break down the topics and do more. Excellent. I'm going to speak to the job about the really. Oh, thank you. Do you know what, guys? That's really nice. You know, any constructive feedback, if you want to email it rather than put it in the chat, that's great. But
I don't want sacking. I'm still on probation.
I mean, you guys are going to do fantastically. You guys are brilliant. So let's have a look at the Q&A. Let's see what people are asking on the questions. Sorry for keeping people past 2 o'clock. So we've got very few questions, which is good. It obviously means that we explained everything fantastically.
I like Carol's comment. Great webinar. I wish my principal had watched this.
Well, we'll try, and what we'll do is we'll have a look at it and we'll see if we can get it on YouTube. No promising yet. But I imagine we can probably get this on YouTube.
We'll be trending, Alex, after this.
Sorry?
We'll be trending influencers.
Is that a good one? Or
No.
are we trending for the right reasons? This bit gets cut out, by the way, so we're fine on the Q&A. We don't include this bit. So so Anna said, "Hi Nikki, you mentioned about a new starter not sitting in the office on the first day." I'm going to touch on this for a second, Nikki, then I will hand over to you if that's all right.
Yeah.
Not sitting in the office on the first day, going through policies. How do you get around this? Well, we're aware that this is an issue because we're all ex-practice managers. So as I said earlier, when we're developing software, we kind of think, well, what are the biggest problems that we need to solve? So when we developed iTeam, our HR software, it does this job for you. It enables you. It emails you. It can help email out the policy. Actually, you can probably explain it better than I can, Nikki. It emails out the policies. You can get people to read it through the software before day one. It's a feature of iTeam, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a key feature of iTeam, actually. So iTeam allows you to send a new starter all the policies and procedures that they need to have, or you need to have signed off before they start the practice. So iTeam will absolutely help you with that. And if you need a demo, just let us know and we can organise that for you really easily. I think for me, how do you get around that? If you haven't got iTeam, that's fine. I think for me, a really important thing to do would be get that person to come in for a day prior to their first day, if that makes sense. So you can get them to come in, maybe check out the uniform size, talk to them then about parking arrangements, local transport, go through their policies and procedures and paperwork with them at that point, really informally, over a cuppa and a bit of cake, something like that. But just, I suppose my message is, on their very first day when they're employed with you, you don't want that person sat in an office on their own, because it's a bit, it's a bit scary, a bit daunting, and it's quite negative for that person. So, they can come in another time and do that, but again, don't leave them on their own in an office. Stay with them and talk through policies and procedures and that kind of thing. But I suppose for me, it's about making sure that their first day is spending a lot of time with the team in your practice, meeting the team, really engaging with the team. Does that make sense?
I think worst case scenario as well, you can just email them out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot more time heavy attaching them to the email than the software. Again, the software is trying to get you efficiency to reduce your management time. But worst case scenario, just throw those in. Someone said, sorry, Christine, did you want to touch on that one at all, or are we happy to move on?
Just quickly with the iTeams application, but you don't really have to think as well, which is great in dentistry, because you need to be treating those patients. But the iTeams application also knows what documents you would need for a trainee nurse or a therapist. So again, you don't really have to think about those things either. It just does it for you.
Yeah, that's really good. Someone said, Louisa said, and I'll open, we'll all answer on this one, mate. Louisa said, how can you make the employer see the value in well-paid staff? I think that's a really interesting question, because firstly, I'd say if you have the culture and you have the vision and you have the values and you have the mission and you have that and you appreciate, and that actually on my slide, I probably didn't mention it, salary was at the bottom with the strike through it, because it is important to pay your staff well or competitively. However, I'd say the other stuff's more important to get right. Obviously not underpaid. If you're paying market rate, well-paid staff is great, but well-paid staff in a business that doesn't have the culture and all that stuff, eventually they will just go. Probably they'll just go because the other stuff isn't there. If that makes sense, they appreciate the money, but money is not a driver for most people. It is partly a driver, but it's not the most important driver. I think people would rather be appreciated than be paid over the odds. Most people. Yeah. Obviously, that's my personal opinion on it. I think also it was really interesting, because reading that book that was written 10 years ago, there was a comment in rereading the E-Myth, which I read before. There was a comment in the E-Myth that said historically, dental practices haven't been known for paying their teams very well. They don't see that money as an investment or whatever. They see it as a cost line that needs to be reduced. And again, I think it's that how we view that line on the P&L. If we think of it as cost, and we need to get that cost down, and we need to, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, and eventually you'll have a practice that people don't want to be in. I think that's kind of a very brutally honest answer on it in a way. But Nikki, what do you think on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with absolutely everything you said. And for me, I kind of struggle with that, with getting practice owners to take on board that kind of process of thinking, because for me, team members are absolutely the most important thing in a practice. They have to come first every single time. And value, as you rightly said, Alex, is not always about being very well paid. For some people it is, but not all the time and not every time. I think an interesting conversation would be to have with the practice owner would be about recruitment costs, actually. because at the moment, recruitment costs can be anywhere from between £2,000, maybe £3,000 per person if you're using an agency. And if you take into account the amount of practice managers' time and team members' time that's involved in onboarding somebody really well into your practice, recruitment costs can run into thousands very easily for just one person. So my argument would be, well, you know, if you're churning 1 or 2 team members a year or 18 months, you could be spending anywhere between 5,000 and 7,000 on recruitment. Why would you do that? Instead, why aren't you thinking about investing that money in making your current team members feel valued?
I'd also add on that, try to avoid, if you are recruiting, this is just my personal thing, and I always try to avoid this, try to avoid putting on a job ad competitive salary, because you're making a person spend time to figure out whether or not they're interested in your role. And I think I find that quite, you know, you've got to maybe tailor a CV and send it off before I can have an interview to ask you whether or not this is a job I'd even be interested in because the salary is 10k less than I'd want or something. So I try and always, you can't always avoid it because for certain reasons, but I try to always avoid the competitive salary and give a banding or something and say this role is 20 to 30,000. Actually, I'd probably try 5k banding. That's what I always try to do. Christine, did you have anything on that you wanted to add?
Yeah, just quite quickly, I remember my first ever dental nursing job, which was way back when, and I won't name anybody. It's not on my CV, so nobody ever knew I worked there because it was so long ago now. But but yeah, I remember I left that job to go to another role, and I'd been there about 6 months, and it was all because I didn't feel valued. And his pay wasn't terrible, but it was little things like he never supplied tea or coffee for his staff members, and there was little things that you just thought, oh God, like, you know, and it was you could feel how downbeat it was to work there. Everybody just seemed really unhappy, and everybody moaned out of, you know, the surgery, and it was just not a very negative place to work. So I think nailing that, you need to have a really positive, you know, energetic business to do well. So supply tea and coffee.
Okay, I mean, I mentioned before about the equity theory and Nespresso for the patient and Nescafe for the team. You could have cut the atmosphere with a knife in that practice. Weirdly enough, a practice that I know that I won't name, but is a very good one that quite a few of us know. You know, that practice had cafetiere coffee for everybody, including the patients. The little mini cafetières, which I always talk about. That practice. You walk in and honestly, it felt like it almost felt like the atmosphere cleared as you walked into the practice. It's cold outside, but you walked in, it was fresh and breezy, and everyone's smiling, and it was just a beautiful atmosphere. I walked into that practice the first time, and I was like, I'm gonna have a great day here. Just could tell instantly. You could feel it. Someone said, and I think this is a good question. And I'll touch on this first, and then I'll pass it over. How do you ensure that a new associate is on our mission and values? They make their own prices up. They run late. They wear their own uniform, which isn't how we work. The owner says they can do what they like. Your answer's in the last sentence, in the fact that if you have these rules, and it's hard, you know, there's a massive cultural thing going on here in this whole little package thing, is that I assume that by the rules they can't make own that. But if those are the rules and the owners aren't enforcing them, then they're not the rules. There's something you've put down on paper, or you've created there's one rule for the team and one rule for the dentist. Now, years ago I had an experience as was assistant practice manager or as a practice manager, where basically an associate chewed me out in front of half the team, shouted at me. I was young, and I probably wasn't the most diplomatic about it, but they were completely in the wrong. So I responded in kind and told them exactly why they were in the wrong and showed the evidence. And then I got told off by the practice principal because a dentist was allowed to talk to an admin person like that. But I wasn't allowed to talk back like that. So I handed in my resignation 5 minutes later because that was one rule for them, one rule for the dentist, one rule for the management, and that just immediately got my back up, and I was gone at that point. So I think with something like that, unless the owner has defined the culture, written it all down, and then reinforces the culture and holds people accountable to it, then it's that's what's going to happen. Nikki, anything you want to add to that?
No, I totally agree with that. Don't get me started on that. I could talk about that all day.
We could all talk about this all day. And that's the end of the day. And at the end of the day, the owner decides the culture. At the end of the day, it is. I'm not saying that people have to do their mission or have to do their values or have. What I'm saying is that's what successful businesses that attract and retain people do. You don't have to do it, but then don't be surprised if you lose people and can't attract people. So you decide. So this owner here is deciding what they want their business to be. So we've done that. We've done that. Is this webinar being recorded? Yes, it is. Will we publish it? Most likely, yes. The loyal this is an interesting one. Desiree said, loyal employee, but doesn't want to upskill. Just does the CPD, not interested in radiography. Any advice on how to encourage them to upskill? If you don't need them to, don't bother. Is my advice. That is about understanding the employee. There are people. There are some people who just, there are people who are really career hungry, want to climb the ladder, want to do that. There are people who start off like that and then change. Another good point is don't criticize someone for changing their mind. This is a really good one, and I've learned this along the way. Is people do change their mind. You do it, they do it. So if someone came on board really hungry and then they're not, then what is the practices with this person? What is the practices strategy? What do they want to achieve? Do you need this person to learn and develop? Does their role have to have these skills? And then does that obviously then end up further down the line of the conversation of whether or not this is the right practice for them to work in, because the practice now has a mission, it has this. If you don't need them to, though, and they're loyal and they're hardworking, don't push them and just be like, fine, I understand that's what you want. We're not going to invest in you. Let me know if you change your mind. You want an easy life. You want to sit on the desk. You want to do this. Fine, you're good at your job. No worries. Would you both agree? Or
I think on that point, I think we have to remember that not everybody wants to do X amount of qualifications, and that's absolutely fine. And we shouldn't see that as a negative. And as long as they're working hard and they're happy, then that should be celebrated too.
Yeah,
that's understanding. Is what do they want? Which is what we were saying. A good business, good leaders engage with their team, know their team. I have half an hour, at least half an hour one-to-ones with all of everyone who reports into me at least once a week. And if we've got nothing really to talk about because everything's on track, we'll have a good chat. What's going on? Just to and I think that's really important in a team to know and understand and everything. So the last one I think we've got, and then we're done. Karen said, any thoughts on the staff getting the cut of the profits that the practice makes? I think if it's done well, it's a really good tool. Some people don't want to share a cut of the profits. I think what's quite good quite often is to decide at what point, if let's say you've got two principals in the practice in a partnership, if they decide in an annual budgeting exercise how much profit they each want to make on an annual basis, and then you've got an overflow pot for bonus or something like that. So there's ways of dealing with it. There's ways of creating it that does work really, really well and being transparent. Nikki, you've probably got some experience on this maybe, or something similar. I don't know. You might not have.
Sorry, were you asking me?
Yeah, I was just saying on profit sharing with team.
Yeah, I think the incentive
I said if it's managed well.
Yeah, incentive schemes, bonus schemes, they're all really good, and I think they're a really good idea. There just needs to be a lot of transparency around that. It needs to be planned and organised really well. And I think actually, any thoughts on staff getting a cut of the profits? Yeah, I think they need to be related to individual goals and targets for those team members, though.
That's really interesting, because I know some people would argue the opposite, would go for team bonus because they don't want to cause the friction within. I think there's multiple. I know, because I can argue both sides of it equally. I think that the thing is to be careful with it, because I am aware of a practice where they didn't think to cap it or something like that. So suddenly they'd made loads more profit than they expected, and they actually ended up giving far larger bonuses than they wanted to.
You've got to be careful.
So you've got to
plan it really carefully. Of course you can. Of course you have. But absolutely, I'm a big fan of incentive schemes, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
Did you want to touch on that, Christine?
No, really, that's all quite good what you've said, really.
We've got 2 more. We've got 1 more minute. So there's 2. Someone's just said we give 2% of the profits of the private work to staff via a store card. They love it. Great, Louise.
Fantastic.
Idea.
Absolutely fantastic.
Where's
your work, Louise?
Yeah.
No, it sounds fantastic.
That's really good. And then we've got another question, which says, I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm so sorry. Myrula. How do you deal with an associate who is late regularly? I think at the end of the day, that's about what's in your contract with them. Your contract for services. It's with an associate in something like that. Your contract should say what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to be there. And at the end of the day, if they're not doing that, they are breaching contract with you. So then it's a contractual conversation to do with, just a very nice way, just as in we're having an issue with your contract. You follow through with letters. I think the difficulty with something like that, especially at the moment, is how most people aren't prepared to talk about, have those conversations with their associates because they're terrified of losing them. So it's very difficult right now. But at the bottom line, it's about there's an agreement in place that they are breaking. For me, I don't know about you, Nick. Obviously, if we're talking about an employee, actually maybe you deal with it the same way. If you talk about an employee, you can go down the line of why.
Yeah, I mean, I would still want to know. I'd still want to have a human conversation to start with. I'd want to know if there was an issue. Is there something going on at home that we don't know about? And really dig deep and try and find out what the issue there is, what the problem is. And if it boils down to the fact that actually that person thinks I'm the associate, I'll just turn up as and when I choose, well then we need to go right back to the beginning and start thinking about culture again. And where's the culture in your practice that is allowing that to kind of happen? And then, as Alex has rightly said, if you follow those kind of couple of steps and done a bit of digging and find out what's going on, then it's definitely a contractual conversation after that.
I think I've probably had too much experience of that scenario. Actually, to be honest, every single time I've dealt with that scenario as a manager, it's been because they were an associate and they felt there literally is no. I don't think there's ever been one scenario where there was actually a good reason. So I just went straight to that.
I'll just having that conversation.
Right, I am. I'm very sorry that we need to cut. We've hit 2:30. A couple of questions have come up. Actually, there's one there that I will touch on really, really quickly. Kelly said, "How would you deal with a principal who's always late?" Talk about the values that he's setting for the rest of the team. If he's always late, he can't then expect the team to be on time. At the end of the day, leadership has to be from the front, and that's the. So I think the conversation with the principal is what are the values of the practice, the message that he's giving to the team in the practice. And if he's happy with that, then he's happy with that. If it's a do as I say, not as I do, and that's the culture of the business, then that's his prerogative. That's the culture of his business as well. So I think there's from a managerial perspective, I'd talk about how you can do your job as a manager if the message that seems to be coming from leadership is that it's not important to be on time. Would anybody agree, disagree with that?
No, I don't think so. No, I think it's spot on.
Right. So someone said how to handle a matter of an associate who doesn't want to do NHS after April if there are no changes to the contract but only wants to do private only. That's why there's some why conversations, but that boils down to a contractual conversation. They're basically saying we want to renegotiate our contract with you. If we're going really pure down to it, they're saying to the core of what it is, they're saying I want to renegotiate the terms of this contract. So you need to explore that, see whether it's possible for the business. Can you give them what they want? Is it possible for them to do that? Could someone else do the NHS? But if it's not possible at the end of the day, then it might be difficult. They might serve notice on the contract. So, right. Thank you all. Samantha, I'm afraid we can't do any more. We've got meetings and things to go to. So I do apologise. But Samantha, I know obviously you're a long-standing member. So any questions you want, as always, please pick up the phone. And if you've watched this webinar and you are interested in any of our, we've still got 100 people left at 2:30. which is I'm glad you all stayed to have a chat.
Thank
this
you.
long. Obviously, it's a really important topic to people. So I'd like to thank everyone for their time. Christine, thank you for the hard work you did preparing for this, and same with Nikki, and for sharing your stories with the lucky members of this webinar. So all I'm going to say is bye. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye. Have a great week.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.